Hi everybody, and welcome back to Iconic Rod and Custom and our YouTube channel. Coupe Simone. You've seen in other videos that I've posted about the talk about building it and the scanning of it on the original die-cast model that we had. And this video, this episode 1 actually of the Rise of Coupe Simone, we're outlining how we're laying out the chassis and building the chassis. You can see here we already have the wire form pretty much made. We're not completely done with it yet, but that'll be in a different episode, obviously, episode 2 more likely. But as far as the process, the chassis process, the frame rails, you know, we're going to go through and we're going to start at ground zero and take you folks all the way through it. So please, if you haven't, like, subscribe, and please comment on this. This is going to be a long process. There's going to be a lot of episodes, and we'd love to have you folks along with us for the whole journey and comment and interact with us. It's going to be awesome. I don't know what else to say, but a lot of work ahead of us too. So please join in.
Paper patterns are one of the cheapest ways to make a mistake. Here we're designing the front frame rails of the chassis, and they have to curve up over the straight axle and then taper down. So we'll design this, we'll print it out on a plotter, and then from there we'll move it over to a temper board, make a hard pattern from. We'll actually do that with the back as well, even though it'll be a different design. Once we get it all sized and oriented the way we need it to print, we simply hit the print button and go over to the machine. This is thin paper that I'm actually using, so I'm helping it along a little bit. So it doesn't wrinkle up as the ink cartridge draws out the pattern. It's a relatively simple process, to be honest. So we'll cut this paper pattern out and lay it on our temper board. Temper board is an 1/8 inch thick hard board that makes a great template. Here Scott is finishing up the contour shape with a sanding block after he's cut it out with a saber saw. From there, we will use flat steel to create our sweep up over the front axle and where it tapers down to the very front of the frame horns. So now that we have our template made up for the front frame sections, you can see it laying on this 2x6 tubing. It actually overlaps the first one and most of the second one laying side by side. We're just getting a general idea of the layout. Now we could go different routes with this. You could do a lot of pie cuts and bend this tubing up around and then taper it down, but that's an awful lot of welding and trial and error. But what we elected to do, we're going to actually plasma cut a lot of this away. Well, Scott is laying out the lines on both sides of these 2x6 frame rails. I'm cutting some profiles out, just straight edges, so we have something to follow as a guide as we cut these center sections out. We do have a CNC plasma table, but it's not quite big enough for as long as these sections are that we need to cut out. So we're doing it by hand. So I'll get these all lined up and clamped down, and I'm going to let Scott cut these out. He's a little younger than me, and his hand is probably a little steadier than mine. A plasma cutter sure does come in handy, and it speeds things up dramatically. If we had to cut all this out with the cut-off wheels, we would go through a ton of them. So after we get the 4 sides cut off these 2 rails, Scott goes back and dresses them up a little bit with a grinder, just to knock off any excess slag and whatnot. You can see Dennis in the background as well from DMK Media Productions. They're actually doing a documentary on this complete build. So I'll have more information on that as we progress. I don't know if it's going to be one single production or if there's going to be several. I'm not sure how they're doing that yet, but I'll keep people updated. So now we have 2 floppy tops and bottoms we got to work with. So our sides, we're going to cut out a 3/16 inch steel, and you can see on the plate that we have them all laid out already and traced out with the template that we had created from the timber board. So after we have all 4 of these cut and cleaned up, now we need to start welding them to the ends of the 2x6 tubing. Now here you can see a 2x2 piece of tubing clamped and holding that all straight after we get it aligned. And what we're going to do, we're going to take those flimsy tops and bottoms that are just flapping around, and we're going to wrap that right around that frame horn. Now as we move along, we'll tack these every so often to hold their position. We don't want to overheat it yet. We want to keep everything square and from twisting. But as you can see, it goes pretty quick with the wrap around the top. The bottom's a little bit different. You have to clamp it up in more so it stays in place. So getting the bottom side set up and clamped, well, that was a 2-man job to start with, at least for the first one. So now you can start seeing it taking shape. Here Scott's actually wrapping the top down around the front frame horn and getting it all lined up so he can trim it down to whatever size he needs, and then tack welds it together. So now it's time to flip the frame rail over and repeat the process on the back side, except this time we don't have to wrap, it's already done. Just have to make sure it all lines up. Now, you'll notice that piece of metal that he slipped under the very front of that frame horn on this side that's going to be welded on. That's so it doesn't slip down inside whatsoever. Very easy, very simple trick, but it's handy to have. So many times when you start welding, something will start changing position because of the shrinkage that happens when you actually weld. So yeah, it helps great. Once he has it all set into position, he'll remove that piece after he makes a couple tacks in the back of it, and he'll use a screwdriver to finesse it from there and tweak it into position, whatever needs moved a little bit, just to assure that everything's got a proper fit. And once he has several tacks in it, he'll go back through, tighten everything up so there's no gaps, put some clamps on, use that Craftmatic adjustable hammer there, you know, to tap everything in place. So we just try to do the best job we can and make it look like it's factory, even if it wasn't. As Scott's tacking up the second frame rail, I go ahead and start grinding the first one that's all welded up with a 4.5-inch grinder with a flap wheel on it. We'll get them all ground down and dressed up nice, look like one piece. I'm sure you've noticed the metal stands that we have these frame rails setting on. We're going to build this whole chassis on these sawhorses or metal stands. You know, it's it's been said that, you know, you need a chassis table, a level surface, blah blah blah. Yes, we have one. We have a chassis or jig table. Mighty Mouse is sitting on it right now. But there's been more chassis, thousands of them, literally built on a garage floor, you know, across the United States and the other countries. You don't have to have one. As long as your work surface is level, everything is plumb, level, you know, and then square. You know, you cross measure to get your squareness. But that's the way we're going to do this, because most folks that are watching this don't have access to a chassis table, a fabrication table, or anything like that. And as I said, there's been literally thousands upon thousands of chassis built on the home garage, you know, just on the floor or on jack stands. So Scott jumped in where I left off. Had the DeWalt grinder pretty heated up, so he elected to get the 7-inch air grinder, and he's going to use that for a little while. You know, I don't know how many of you have built chassis before, but it is time consuming. You know, you got to take your time and have patience, because it can warp on you really quick and go south, you know. So the time, the patience is key. These frame rails really came together nice. We're not going to go through the whole process of doing the back half of them again. We'll just show a couple of details and photos and a video here, but you can see these sitting together right now. I mean, and they're like really, really close, within a 1/16 of an inch, and that's pretty good for not having a jig set up or anything. So I think we did a pretty phenomenal job on that. But we will get these squared up. We're going to put some X cross bracing in it to keep everything square, and we'll put the front and rear tubes on them as well, because they'll be permanent. But the chassis is nowhere near done. You know, we got a lot of dressing up to do, and we have our actual cross members when we figure out where they need to be. But it all came together really, really nice. As you can see, it's pretty darn long. It's 195.5 inches long, I think. And you can see that little string there. That's our center line we have set up. And we need to know the center line reference so we can start building our buck, or bird cage, whatever you would like to call it. But here's a little shot of what's to come in the next video. Hey, thanks for following. Please like and subscribe and comment